The wind cut through Aidan Cross's threadbare jacket like a blade, each gust reminding him that winter in Newark didn't give a damn about 18-year-old kids with nowhere to go. He pulled his knit cap lower over his dark hair, the wool scratched and unraveling at the edges, a gift from Sister Margaret at the group home before he'd aged out 2 years ago, before everything went to hell. His breath came out in white puffs as he trudged down the cracked sidewalk, past boarded-up storefronts and houses that looked like broken teeth in the city's dying grin. Snow was beginning to fall harder now, fat flakes that melted instantly on the wet pavement but stuck to car windshields and fire escapes. The weather report had called for 8 inches overnight. For most people, that meant staying inside with hot cocoa and Netflix. For Aidan, it meant finding shelter or risking hypothermia in some doorway. He'd been walking for 3 hours since getting kicked out of the McDonald's on Broad Street. The manager, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and no patience, had told him he couldn't camp out in the booth nursing a single coffee all day. Fair enough. He understood the business, but understanding didn't make the cold any less brutal. Aidan's stomach cramped with hunger, a familiar sensation that had been his constant companion for the better part of 2 years. The $5.37 in his pocket wouldn't stretch to cover both food and a night at the Fleabag Motel on Springfield Avenue. He'd learned to choose shelter over food when the temperature dropped below freezing. Dead men didn't eat. As he turned onto Seymour Avenue, a residential street lined with narrow houses in various states of decay, something caught his eye. 3 houses down, sitting dark and apparently empty, was a 2-story Victorian with a for sale sign that had been weathered into illegibility. More importantly, there was a gap in the plywood covering one of the ground floor windows, and no cars in the driveway. Aidan had broken into abandoned houses before. He wasn't proud of it, but pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. He'd learned the difference between temporary shelter and actual theft, and he always left a place exactly as he'd found it. Sometimes he'd even clean up, figuring it was the least he could do. He approached the house carefully, scanning the neighbors' windows for twitching curtains or the blue glow of security cameras. The street was quiet, most of the other houses showing the warm yellow light of families settling in for the evening. Aidan felt the familiar pang of longing, not for wealth or luxury, just for the simple comfort of a place where he belonged. The gap in the plywood was just wide enough for him to squeeze through if he removed his backpack first. He did a final check of the street, then slipped his worn JanSport off his shoulders and pushed it through the opening. A moment later, he followed. Inside, the house smelled of dust and neglect, with an underlying dampness that suggested plumbing issues. Streetlight filtered through gaps in the boards, casting geometric shadows across a living room that had been stripped of anything valuable. Water stains bloomed across the ceiling like abstract art, and wallpaper peeled in long strips that rustled in the draft. But it was dry, and it was warm enough to survive the night. More than he'd hoped for. Aidan pulled a small LED keychain light from his pocket, a remnant from his brief stint working at a warehouse before getting laid off, and used its weak beam to explore. The kitchen had been gutted, copper pipes presumably stolen for scrap metal. The upstairs was missing floorboards in places, making it too dangerous to navigate in the dark. That left the basement. The door was ajar, revealing wooden steps that creaked ominously under his weight. The basement was surprisingly finished, with paneled walls and industrial carpeting that squelched slightly underfoot. Someone had lived down here, maybe recently. There was an old hospital bed in one corner, the kind with metal rails, and a card table with 2 folding chairs. But what drew Aidan's attention was something else entirely. In the far corner, partially hidden behind the water heater, was what looked like a small fort made from stacked boxes and old furniture. Someone had arranged it like a makeshift bedroom, complete with the hospital bed, some battery-operated lanterns, and even a few paperback books. It looked like a hideout, the kind of place someone might retreat to when the world got too overwhelming. Aidan understood that feeling intimately. He approached slowly, playing his small light across the makeshift camp. The bed had clean sheets, military-style hospital corners. Whoever had been living here knew how to take care of themselves. On the card table, he found a journal bound in cracked leather, its pages filled with precise handwriting in blue ink. Curiosity overrode his usual caution. He opened to a random page and began to read. March 15th. Torino crew getting suspicious. Tony asked too many questions about the Brennan shipment. Need to move the package soon. Vincent thinks he's being followed, but Vincent thinks everyone's following him. Still, better safe than sorry. The basement location is secure for now, but if they find me... Aiden's pulse quickened. This wasn't the diary of some homeless person or runaway kid. This read like something from a crime movie. He flipped through more pages, finding references to the Romano family, federal interest, and something called the package. The last entry was dated 6 months ago. September 3rd. It's over. FBI raided the office, but they didn't find what they were looking for. Vincent's in the wind, probably dead by now. The package stays hidden until I can figure out what to do with it. Can't trust anyone. Not the feds, not the family, not even my own shadow. Emma's better off thinking I'm dead. At least she's safe. Emma, someone's daughter, presumably. Aiden felt an unexpected twist of sympathy. He knew what it was like to wonder about missing parents. But what was this package the writer kept mentioning? Aiden set the journal down and began examining the makeshift camp more carefully. The bed was positioned oddly, pushed up against the wall in a way that blocked access to the space behind it. He grabbed one end and pulled it away from the wall, his small light beam following the movement. That's when he saw it. Set into the concrete floor, almost perfectly camouflaged, was a metal hatch about 3 feet square. It had been painted to match the basement floor, but up close, the seams were visible, and there was a combination lock built into the handle. Aiden knelt beside the hatch, running his fingers along its edges. This wasn't some DIY project. This was professional work, the kind of thing that cost serious money to install. Someone had wanted to hide something badly enough to essentially build a safe into their basement floor. The combination lock was a 5-digit model, well-maintained and recently oiled. Aiden tried the obvious combinations first. 0000, punthole 345, the kind of codes lazy people used. Nothing. He tried dates from the journal, birth years that might make sense for someone middle-aged. Still nothing. Then he remembered something from one of the journal entries, a date that had been circled 72851. July 28th, 1951, maybe? Or just a random number that meant something to whoever had written the journal. He spun the combination 72851. Click! The lock opened. Aiden's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the heavy hatch. The space below was lined with metal, like a large safe deposit box, and his small light revealed stacks of something wrapped in plastic and military-grade canvas. The packages were uniform in size, roughly the dimensions of hardcover books, but much heavier. He reached down and pulled one out, surprised by its weight. Through the clear plastic wrapping, he could see a rectangular bar of golden metal with markings stamped into its surface. Even in the weak light of his keychain LED, there was no mistaking what he was looking at. Gold. Real. Solid gold. Aiden's breath caught in his throat. He unwrapped the bar completely, turning it over in his hands. It was heavier than he'd expected, maybe 2 pounds, and stamped with numbers and symbols he didn't recognize. But he knew enough about precious metals from watching pawn shop reality shows to know that this was the genuine article. And there were dozens more in the hidden compartment. With shaking hands, he pulled out several more bars, lining them up on the basement floor. Each one was identical, bearing the same mysterious markings. He counted 24 bars in total, and even conservative estimates put each one at several $1,000s. This wasn't just money, this was life-changing money. Enough to get an apartment, go to college, start over somewhere new. Enough to never sleep in a doorway or get kicked out of a McDonald's again. But whose was it? And why was it hidden in an abandoned house? The journal's references to the FBI and organized crime took on a more sinister meaning now. This wasn't some lucky accident. This was the kind of discovery that got people killed. Aiden's practical mind kicked in, overriding his excitement. He needed to think this through carefully. He couldn't just walk into a pawn shop with a bag full of gold bars that would raise questions he couldn't answer. He needed to understand what he'd stumbled into before he made any moves. He rewrapped one of the bars and slipped it into his jacket pocket, then carefully returned the others to their hiding place. The hatch closed with a soft click, and he pushed the bed back against the wall. To any casual observer, the basement would look exactly as he'd found it. But Aiden's mind was racing. He settled onto the hospital bed with the journal, using his small light to read more entries. The picture that emerged was of Vincent Romano, who appeared to be some kind of accountant or financial manager for a crime family. The gold was part of something larger, some kind of scheme that had gone bad, and Romano had a daughter named Emma who thought he was dead. As Aiden read, snow continued to fall outside, muffling the sounds of the city. For the first time in months, he wasn't worried about staying warm or finding food. Instead, his mind was consumed with possibilities and dangers in equal measure. The gold represented freedom, but it also represented a choice. He could take it and disappear, start fresh somewhere far from Newark. Or he could try to understand what had happened to Vincent Romano and what the gold really represented. Either way, Aiden Cross's life had just changed forever. He was still reading when he heard the footsteps upstairs. Heavy boots, moving carefully but not quietly enough. At least 2 people, maybe 3. They were trying to be stealthy, but the old house's floors betrayed every step. Aiden's blood turned to ice water. He killed his light immediately and held his breath, listening. Voices, low and urgent, filtered down through the ceiling. "Sure, this is the place?" Romano's girlfriend confirmed it. Said he used to disappear for hours, always came back smelling like this basement. FBI already tossed this place twice. Found nothing. FBI don't know what they're looking for. Aiden's hands moved instinctively to the gold bar in his pocket. These weren't cops or federal agents. These were the people Vincent Romano had been hiding from. And they'd found his hiding place just minutes after Aiden had discovered the treasure. The footsteps were moving toward the basement door. Aiden looked around desperately for an escape route, but there was nowhere to go. The basement had only one entrance, and they were about to come down it. He could hide behind the water heater or under the stairs, but if they searched thoroughly, and they would, he'd be found. The basement door creaked open. "Check everything," a gravelly voice commanded. Vincent was careful, but he wasn't invisible. "The gold's here somewhere." The flashlight beams began probing down the stairs, much stronger than Aiden's little keychain light. In seconds, they'd illuminate the entire basement, including whatever hiding spot he chose. There was only one option left. Aiden slipped the journal into his jacket next to the gold bar, then moved as quietly as possible to the space under the stairs. It wasn't much of a hiding spot, but it might buy him a few crucial seconds when they came down. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs, and suddenly the basement was flooded with harsh white light from powerful flashlights. "Jesus, what a dump," one of them muttered. "Romano lived like a rat toward the end," another voice replied. "Paranoid bastard. With good reason. He stole from us, Tony. 92 million in gold. Just gone. $92 million. Aiden's mind reeled. The bars he'd found weren't just life-changing money. They represented a fortune beyond his wildest imagination. And now he was trapped in a basement with people who would kill him without hesitation to get it back. The men were spreading out, searching methodically. Their lights played across the walls, the ceiling, the makeshift camp. It was only a matter of time before one of them thought to look under the stairs. "Hey," one of them called out. "Someone's been living down here recently." "How recently?" "Sheets are clean, books are still here. Could be Romano, could be someone else." Check everything twice. Vincent was smart enough to fool the FBI. He didn't just leave 92 million sitting around. One of the flashlight beams swept toward Aiden's hiding spot, and he pressed himself deeper into the shadows under the stairs. The beam passed over him, paused, then moved on. For now. But they were getting closer to the bed, and when they moved it away from the wall, they'd find the hatch, they'd find the gold. And then they'd search the basement again, more thoroughly this time. Aiden closed his eyes and tried to think of a plan. Any plan that didn't end with him dead on the basement floor of an abandoned house. Outside, the blizzard howled against the windows, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed through the night. But in the basement of 1247 Seymour Avenue, three very dangerous men were about to discover that Vincent Romano's hiding place wasn't as secret as they'd thought. And Aiden Cross, 18-year-old orphan who just wanted a warm place to sleep, was about to learn that $92 million in stolen gold came with a price he might not survive paying. The flashlight beam swept past Aiden's hiding spot for the third time, and he knew his luck wouldn't hold much longer. The three men were being methodical now, one of them moving the hospital bed while the others searched behind every piece of equipment in the basement. "Tony, look at this," the gravelly voice called out. "Bed's positioned weird, like someone was trying to hide something behind it. Move it!" This was it. In seconds, they'd find the hatch, and then they'd tear the basement apart looking for whoever had been here recently. Aiden's only chance was to create a distraction and run for the stairs while they were focused elsewhere. He felt around in the darkness under the stairs, his fingers closing around a piece of broken concrete that had fallen from somewhere above. Not much of a weapon, but it might serve as a distraction. "Holy shit," one of the men breathed. "There's a hatch in the floor. Can you open it? It's got a combination lock. Give me a minute." Aiden heard the metallic clicking of someone working the lock mechanism. They were good. Within 30 seconds, there was a triumphant grunt and the sound of the heavy hatch opening. "Jesus Christ, Tony, you need to see this." "What is it?" "Empty. The whole thing's empty." Silence fell over the basement, thick and dangerous. Aiden realized what had happened. When he'd taken the gold bars out earlier, he'd been too focused on examining them to put them back exactly right. He'd left the cache empty. "Someone beat us here." Tony's voice was deadly quiet. "Recently." "How recently?" "Lock's still warm from being opened. Whoever did this, they're not far." The flashlight beams began moving again, but now they were searching with predatory intensity. These weren't just treasure hunters anymore, they were hunting. "Spread out, check every inch. Whoever took our gold is still in this house." Aiden knew he had seconds before they found him. He gripped the piece of concrete, took a deep breath, and hurled it across the basement toward the far wall. It struck something metal with a sharp clang. "There!" All three flashlights swung toward the sound, and their owners moved in that direction. Aiden saw his chance and took it, slipping out from under the stairs and sprinting for the wooden steps. His foot hit the first step just as one of the men shouted behind him, "Runner!" Gunshots exploded in the confined space of the basement, splinters of wood flying from the stairs around Aiden's feet. He didn't look back, taking the steps 3 at a time and bursting through the basement door into the main floor of the house. Behind him, heavy boots pounded up the stairs. More shots fired, bullets punching through the walls around him as he ran for the living room and the gap in the plywood he'd used to enter. His backpack was still on the floor where he'd left it. Aiden grabbed it without breaking stride and dove through the window opening, landing hard in the snow outside. The cold air hit him like a slap, but adrenaline kept him moving. More gunshots from inside the house, and then he heard the front door splintering open. They were coming after him. Aiden ran down Seymour Avenue, his feet sliding on the snow-slicked sidewalk. The blizzard had intensified, visibility down to maybe 20 feet, but that worked in his favor. He could hear his pursuers behind him shouting to each other, but the snow muffled their voices and hid his direction. He cut through a vacant lot, then down an alley, using every trick he'd learned from 2 years of avoiding police, security guards, and hostile citizens. The key was to keep moving, change direction frequently, and use the environment to break line of sight. By the time he reached the 24-hour laundromat on Springfield Avenue, he was reasonably sure he'd lost them. But he couldn't be certain, and he couldn't go back to any of his usual spots. Those men had found Vincent Romano's hiding place. They might find his, too. Aidan pushed through the laundromat's glass door, grateful for the warmth and the bright fluorescent lights. The place was nearly empty, except for an elderly woman folding towels and a tired-looking man reading a newspaper while his clothes tumbled in a dryer. He found a seat in the back corner where he could watch the street and pulled out his phone, a prepaid flip phone he'd bought at a corner store with money from odd jobs. No internet, no GPS tracking, but it made calls and sent texts. More importantly, it was anonymous. His hands shook as he scrolled through the contacts. There weren't many. A few numbers for temporary employment agencies, the local homeless shelter, and one entry labelled Sister Margaret. Sister Margaret O'Connor had run the group home, where Aidan lived until he aged out. She was tough but fair, and she'd always told him he could call if he needed help. He'd never taken her up on that offer, too proud and too stubborn to admit he was struggling. But this was different. This was life or death. He dialed her number. St. Joseph's Group Home. This is Margaret. Her voice was exactly as he remembered, warm but no nonsense, with a slight Irish accent that became more pronounced when she was tired. Sister Margaret, it's Aidan Cross. A pause. Aidan, my goodness, it's been what, 2 years? Are you all right? You sound... I'm in trouble, he interrupted. Big trouble. I don't know who else to call. Where are you? Springfield Avenue Laundromat. Sister, I need help, but I can't tell you everything over the phone. Would you be willing to meet me somewhere? Another pause, longer this time. Aidan, if you're in legal trouble, I'm not the one who broke the law, he said quickly. But I stumbled into something, and there are people trying to kill me. I know how that sounds, but I'm coming to get you, she said firmly. Stay exactly where you are. 20 minutes. The line went dead, and Aidan felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Sister Margaret had flaws. She could be rigid, demanding, sometimes harsh in her discipline, but she'd never abandoned one of her kids. Ever. While he waited, Aidan pulled out the gold bar and the journal, studying both more carefully. The bar was stamped with numbers that meant nothing to him, but the journal was full of details about Vincent Romano's life and the circumstances that had led to his disappearance. Romano had been a forensic accountant, someone who tracked money through complex financial systems. He'd been hired by the Torino crime family to audit their legitimate businesses, but somewhere along the way, he'd discovered they were using those businesses to launder much larger sums. The gold was payment for an arms-dealing operation, according to one entry. 92 million in precious metals that was supposed to be transferred to offshore accounts and converted to untraceable currency. Instead, Romano had stolen it and gone into hiding. But why? The journal entries suggested he'd been trying to protect someone, his daughter Emma. There were references to threats against her, to the family using her safety as leverage to keep Romano compliant. February 8th. They know about Emma's college applications. Mentioned her by name at today's meeting. Wouldn't want anything to happen to such a promising young woman. Message received loud and clear. But I can't keep doing this. The arms deals are getting bigger, more international. People are going to die. February 15th. Made my choice. Took the gold tonight. Vincent thinks I'm crazy, but he doesn't have a daughter to protect. FBI won't help. They need the family intact for their investigation. I'm on my own. Aidan was still reading when Sister Margaret walked through the laundromat door. She looked older than he remembered, silver threading through her brown hair, new lines around her eyes. But she moved with the same purposeful energy that had made her legendary among the group home kids. She spotted him immediately and crossed to his corner, her expression mixing concern with the kind of maternal sternness that had kept dozens of troubled teenagers in line over the years. You look terrible, she said without preamble, settling into the plastic chair across from him. "When's the last time you ate a proper meal?" "Sister, that's not—" "It's exactly the point, Aiden Cross. You've been living on the streets for 2 years, haven't you? Too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to admit you needed it." He started to argue, then stopped. She wasn't wrong, and they had more pressing concerns than his living situation. "Sister, I need to show you something, but not here. Somewhere private." She studied his face, and he saw the moment she realized he was genuinely frightened. The maternal lecture expression shifted to something harder, more protective. "My car's outside. We'll go to the rectory at St. Bartholomew's. Father Murphy's visiting his sister in Boston, so we'll have privacy." The drive through the snow-covered streets was tense, both of them scanning the mirrors for signs of pursuit. Sister Margaret's 15-year-old Honda Civic wasn't much to look at, but it was warm and dry, and for the moment, safe. St. Bartholomew's Rectory was a modest brick building next to the church, and Sister Margaret let them in through the kitchen door with a key from her purse. The interior was spartanly furnished but comfortable, with the kind of well-worn furniture that spoke of decades of service. In the small living room, under the warm light of a table lamp, Aiden showed her everything: the gold bar, the journal, and his story of the night's events. Sister Margaret listened without interruption, her expression growing more grave with each detail. When he finished, she sat back in her chair and was quiet for a long moment. "Aiden," she said finally, "this Vincent Romano, do you think he's still alive?" "I don't know. The journal entries stopped 6 months ago. But those men tonight, they were talking about him like he might be. And his daughter, Emma. I think she's about my age, maybe a college student. The journal says she thinks her father is dead." Sister Margaret stood and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain to check the street. "You said these men fired guns at you?" "Yes, ma'am. Real bullets, not warnings." She turned back to him. "Then we need to involve the authorities." "Sister, no. The journal mentions the FBI, but Romano didn't trust them either. He thought they were more interested in their investigation than protecting him or his daughter." That may have been true then, but she was interrupted by the sound of Aiden's phone buzzing. He looked at the display. Unknown number. "Don't answer that," Sister Margaret said quickly, but Aiden was already flipping it open. "Hello? Is this Aiden Cross?" The voice was female, professional, with a slight accent he couldn't place. "Who's asking?" "My name is Lisa Chen. I'm a federal agent, and I believe you found something tonight that belongs to my investigation." Aiden's blood ran cold. He looked at Sister Margaret, who was shaking her head vigorously. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Mr. Cross, 3 men broke into 1247 Seymour Avenue tonight. Neighbors reported gunshots. When patrol officers responded, they found evidence of a hidden compartment that had been recently emptied. They also found this phone number written on a piece of paper in the basement." Aiden frowned. He hadn't written down his number anywhere. "Unless Vincent Romano had your number," Agent Chen continued. "We found it in his apartment when we finally located him yesterday. He's been trying to contact you." "That's impossible. I've never met Vincent Romano." "Haven't you? Think carefully about your history, Mr. Cross. Think about the group home you lived in, and who paid for your care there." Sister Margaret was making urgent gestures for him to hang up, but something in the agent's voice made him hesitate. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Vincent Romano has been watching over you for years, Mr. Cross. Anonymous donations to St. Joseph's Group Home, specifically earmarked for your care and education. He's been trying to make contact because he believes you're in danger." "From who?" "The same people who tried to kill you tonight. Mr. Cross, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm offering you federal protection in exchange for your cooperation. Vincent Romano stole $92 million in gold from a criminal organization, and they will kill anyone they think might lead them to it." Aiden looked at Sister Margaret, whose expression had shifted from alarm to confusion. "Why would he care about me?" Aiden asked. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Because Vincent Romano is your father. The phone slipped from Aidan's suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor. Sister Margaret rushed to pick it up, but the line had gone dead. Outside, car engines were approaching through the snow, their headlights casting moving shadows through the rectory windows. Multiple vehicles moving fast. "Aidan," Sister Margaret said urgently, "we need to leave, right now." But he was still processing what he'd just heard, his mind reeling from the revelation. Vincent Romano, the man whose journal he'd been reading, whose gold he'd found, whose hiding place he'd inadvertently discovered, was his father. The same father who had abandoned him as a baby, leaving him to grow up in the system. The father who had apparently been watching over him from a distance for 18 years. The headlights outside were getting brighter, and Sister Margaret was pulling on his arm, trying to get him moving. But Aidan felt frozen, caught between the impossibility of what he'd just learned and the very real danger closing in around them. If Agent Chen was telling the truth, then everything he thought he knew about his life was wrong. And if she was lying, then they were walking into a trap that would get them both killed. The cars were pulling into the church parking lot now, doors slamming in the cold night air, voices calling out commands. "Aidan!" Sister Margaret's voice cut through his paralysis. "We have to go!" He grabbed the journal and the gold bar, stuffed them into his jacket, and followed her toward the back door. But even as they ran through the snow toward her car, his mind was spinning with questions that demanded answers. Who was Vincent Romano really? Why had he abandoned his son, only to watch over him from the shadows? And what did any of this have to do with $92 million in stolen gold? Most importantly, if Vincent Romano was truly his father, then Emma Romano wasn't just some stranger's daughter, she was his sister, and somewhere in the city she was in just as much danger as he was, possibly more because she didn't even know the danger existed. As Sister Margaret's Honda skidded through the snow-covered streets, federal agents and criminals both closing in from different directions, Aidan realized that finding a warm place to sleep had been the easy part. Now, he had to find a way to save a family he'd never known he had. Sister Margaret's Honda fishtailed around the corner onto Market Street, the rear wheels fighting for traction on the snow-packed asphalt. In the rear-view mirror, Aidan could see headlights following at a distance, not close enough to be obviously pursuing them, but not far enough away to be coincidental. "Where are we going?" he asked, gripping the door handle as she took another turn at speed. "Somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses." Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "I've been running a group home for 15 years, Aidan. I know the difference between social workers and predators." "Those weren't federal agents back there. How can you be sure? Federal agents don't travel in groups of 6 vehicles with tinted windows, and they don't surround a church rectory like they're raiding a drug house." She had a point. But that raised even more troubling questions about Agent Chen's phone call. If she wasn't really FBI, how had she known so much about Vincent Romano, about Aidan's connection to the group home, about the gold? Sister Margaret pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner called Mel's Place, positioning the Honda where they could see anyone approaching from multiple directions. The diner's neon sign cast pink and blue light across the snow, and through the large windows they could see maybe a dozen customers scattered across the booths and counter. "We need to call the real police," Sister Margaret said, as they hurried through the cold toward the entrance, "and tell them what? That I broke into an abandoned house and found stolen gold? That I'm being chased by criminals and maybe fake federal agents? They'll arrest me first and ask questions later." "Then what do you suggest?" Aidan didn't have a good answer. Every option seemed to lead to either arrest or death, and he wasn't sure which would be worse. Inside the diner, they found a corner booth with good sightlines to both the front door and the emergency exit near the kitchen. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading Dolores, brought them coffee without being asked. "You two look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "Everything all right?" "Just cold," Sister Margaret replied, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When Dolores moved on to other customers, Aidan pulled out Vincent Romano's journal again. He'd been focused on the gold and the immediate danger, but now he needed to understand the personal history hidden in these pages. He found what he was looking for in an entry from 3 years earlier, March 22nd, Aiden's 15th birthday today. Drove past St. Joseph's, saw him playing basketball in the yard. He's gotten tall, looks like Sarah around the eyes. Wanted to go in, talk to him, but what would I say? Sorry I abandoned you, son, but your mother was murdered by people I owed money to, and I thought you'd be safer without me. The boy deserves better than that truth. Called Sister Margaret instead, made the usual donation under the Shell company name, asked her to make sure he gets that new laptop he's been wanting. She still doesn't know it's from me, thinks it's from some anonymous benefactor. Better that way, safer. Sometimes I wonder if Sarah would be proud of what I became, or disgusted. Probably both. Aiden's hands trembled as he read. His mother's name was Sarah. She'd been murdered. Vincent Romano had been watching him for years, even attending basketball games at the group home from a distance. "What is it?" Sister Margaret asked, noticing his expression. He showed her the entry, watched her read it with growing understanding. "The donations," she said quietly. "Anonymous gifts, always cash, always enough to cover whatever you needed most. New clothes before school started, books, that laptop for your studies. I always wondered who was being so generous." "You never tried to find out?" "I made some inquiries, but the money always came through untraceable channels. I assumed it was from some wealthy benefactor who preferred privacy." She looked at him with new recognition. "Your eyes." "I always thought there was something familiar about them, but I could never place it." Aiden kept reading, learning fragments of a story that recontextualized his entire childhood. Vincent Romano hadn't abandoned him. He'd given him up to protect him. His mother, Sarah Cross, had been killed because of Vincent's debts to dangerous people. By placing Aiden in the group home system under his mother's surname, Vincent had made him invisible to his enemies. But that protection had come at a cost. Aiden had grown up believing he was unwanted, unloved, cast aside by parents who couldn't be bothered with a child. The truth was more complicated and somehow more painful. He'd been abandoned because he was loved. A new entry caught his attention. July 10th. Emma asked about her mother again today. She's 17 now, smart as hell, and she's starting to put pieces together. Found her going through old photo albums, asking questions about pictures from before she was born. I've told her that her mother died in a car accident, that we don't have any family left. How do I explain that her mother was murdered by the same people who killed Sarah, that she has a half-brother she's never met because I was too cowardly to bring the family together? Maybe it's better this way. Emma's going to get into a good college, make something of herself. She doesn't need to know about the blood money that's paying for her education. Emma Romano, his half-sister. The daughter Vincent had kept and raised while sending Aiden away for his own protection. "There's more," Aiden said, flipping to a more recent entry. January 15th. Emma got accepted to Rutgers early admission. Full scholarship, which is good because the situation with the Torinos is getting worse. They're asking more questions about the books, want me to help them move money for bigger operations. International stuff, weapons, human trafficking. I can't be part of that. But if I refuse, they'll hurt Emma. They've made that clear. "Wouldn't want your daughter to have any accidents," Tony said yesterday. "College campuses can be dangerous places. I'm running out of options. The FBI wants me to keep working with the family, gathering evidence for their investigation, but they don't understand. These people don't leave loose ends. If I help the feds, Emma dies. If I don't, more innocent people die in whatever operations I'm helping to finance. There might be another way. The gold shipment next month. If I could intercept it, disappear completely, maybe take Emma somewhere safe." Aiden looked up from the journal to find Sister Margaret watching him intently. "Your sister is in danger," she said. It wasn't a question. "According to this, yes. The criminals I ran into tonight, They're called the Torino family. They were using Vincent to launder money for weapons dealing and human trafficking. When he tried to get out, they threatened Emma, and that's when he stole the gold. $92 million worth, enough to disappear forever, start over somewhere safe. Sister Margaret was quiet for a moment, processing. But he didn't disappear. He went into hiding in Newark, left Emma thinking he was dead. Maybe he couldn't get to her without putting her in more danger, or maybe... Aiden flipped through more pages, looking for answers. He found them in the final entries. August 30th. They found me. Don't know how, but Tony Torino knows I'm alive. Got a message today. We know where you are, Vincent. We know where Emma is too. You have 48 hours to return what you stole, or your daughter pays the price. Can't go to Emma directly, they're watching her. Can't trust the FBI, too many leaks, too many people who owe favors to the family. But there might be another option. Been tracking my boy Aiden for years, making sure he's safe. He's 18 now, tough, smart, grew up hard but clean. If something happens to me, he might be the only one who can help Emma. The only one they won't see coming. Left instructions with my lawyer. If I disappear, Aiden gets contacted. It's a long shot, but it might be enough to save them both. The journal ended there, but the implications were clear. Vincent Romano had been planning to use Aiden as a weapon against the Torino family, not because he didn't care about his son's safety, but because he saw no other way to protect his daughter. Jesus, Aiden breathed. He set this up. The whole thing. Me finding the gold, getting chased by the Torinos, being contacted by that agent. What agent? A new voice asked. Aiden looked up to see a young woman standing beside their booth. She was about his age, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun and intelligent brown eyes that looked hauntingly familiar. She wore a Rutgers sweatshirt under a winter jacket, and her hands were shaking, though whether from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. "Emma?" he asked. She nodded, sliding into the booth across from them without invitation. "Emma Romano, and you must be Aiden Cross, my half-brother that I just found out about 3 hours ago." Sister Margaret looked between them, seeing the family resemblance that was now obvious. "How did you find us?" "I've been following the federal agents who've been following you," Emma said. "Figured if they wanted to find Aiden badly enough to put a team on him, he might have answers about what happened to our father." "Wait," Aiden said. "You knew Vincent was alive. I figured it out about a month ago. Found some papers he'd hidden, financial records that showed money moving after his supposed death. Plus, the story about him dying in a car accident never made sense. No body, no police report, no insurance payout." She pulled a manila envelope from her jacket. "But I didn't know about you until tonight." She slid a photograph across the table. It showed Vincent Romano, unmistakably the man from the journal's author photo, standing with a young woman who had Aiden's eyes and smile. "That's my mother, Sarah Cross," Emma said. "I found it in Dad's desk drawer, along with about 20 other pictures of her. And this." She produced a birth certificate. Aiden Cross, born 18 years and 8 months ago at Newark General Hospital. Father, Vincent Romano. Mother, Sarah Cross. The federal agents who contacted me tonight told me Dad had another child, someone who might be able to help me find him. They said you'd discovered something that belonged to him." Aiden's mind was racing. What federal agents? What did they look like? Professional, black suits, earpieces, the whole federal agent look. The woman in charge said her name was Lisa Chen. Sister Margaret and Aiden exchanged alarmed glances. "Emma," Aiden said carefully, "I don't think those were real federal agents." "What do you mean?" I think the Torino family has been playing us both. They knew about me, they knew about you, and they've been using fake agents to manipulate us into finding Vincent and the gold." Emma's face went pale. "But they knew things, private things about Dad, about his work with the FBI. Because they had access to his apartment, his files, everything. They've been hunting him for months." "Oh, God." Emma put her head in her hands. "I told them where I was going tonight. I thought I was meeting with federal protection." "See, where did you tell them you were going?" "Here. I told them I was following you to Mel's Diner on Market Street." As if summoned by her words, headlights began pulling into the parking lot outside. Not one or two cars, but a convoy of black sedans with tinted windows. "Back door," Sister Margaret said urgently. "Now!" But as they stood to leave, the front door of the diner opened and Agent Lisa Chen walked in. She looked exactly like a federal agent. Professional pantsuit, confident bearing, ID badge visible on her belt. Behind her came two men in similar attire. "Mr. Cross," she called out, her voice carrying across the diner. "Please don't run. We need to talk." The other customers were starting to take notice, conversations dying as people sensed the tension. Dolores, the waitress, was backing toward the kitchen with wide, frightened eyes. "Are you really FBI?" Aiden called back. Agent Chen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Does it matter? What matters is that you have something that belongs to my employers, and they want it back." "Your employers?" "The Torino family has been very patient, Mr. Cross, but patience has its limits." She nodded to her companions, and suddenly the diner erupted in motion. The two agents drew guns, not service weapons but street pistols. Real federal agents would have secured the scene first, established perimeters, called for backup. These people were here to kill them. "Kitchen!" Sister Margaret shouted. They ran toward the back of the diner as gunshots exploded behind them. Dolores screamed, and other customers dove under tables or ran for the front exit. But more armed men were coming through that door, cutting off escape. The kitchen was a maze of stainless steel and hot surfaces, steam rising from pots and fryers. A cook in a white apron stood frozen by the grill, spatula raised like a weapon. "Emergency exit," Aiden shouted. The cook pointed toward a door marked "Fire Exit" near the walk-in cooler. They crashed through it into the alley behind the diner, cold air hitting them like a slap. More black cars were positioned at both ends of the alley, engines running, headlights creating cones of harsh white light in the falling snow. "This way," Emma said, pointing toward a gap between two buildings. They ran through the narrow space, slipping on ice and debris, emerging onto a side street. Behind them, shouts and footsteps echoed in the alley. "My car!" Sister Margaret panted, pointing toward the Honda parked in a side lot. But as they approached it, Aiden saw figures moving in the shadows around the vehicle. They were surrounded, boxed in by people who had clearly done this before. "Aiden!" Emma grabbed his arm. "The gold!" "Do you still have it?" He patted his jacket, feeling the weight of the single bar he'd taken from Vincent's hiding place. "One piece. Why? Because that's what they want. That's what this is all about." "Emma, there were dozens of bars in that cache. This one piece isn't going to satisfy them." "No, but it might buy us time to figure out where Dad really is." Agent Chen's voice echoed from the alley behind them. "Mr. Cross, Miss Romano, there's nowhere to run. Let's discuss this like civilized people." Aiden looked at Emma, really seeing her for the first time. She had their father's determined jaw and their mother's intelligent eyes, but there was something else there too, a strength that reminded him of his own stubborn refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. "Do you trust me?" he asked. "You're my brother," she said simply. "Of course I trust you." "Then follow my lead." Aiden stepped out of the shadows, hands raised, but not empty. The gold bar glinted in the streetlight. "Agent Chen!" he called out. "I have what you want." She emerged from the alley with her two companions, guns drawn but not yet aimed. More figures materialized from the shadows, at least 8 armed men and women, all professional, all deadly serious. "Smart boy," Chen said, "just like your father. Hand over the gold and we can discuss your future. First, I want answers. Where is Vincent Romano?" Chen smiled. "Vincent Romano is dead, Mr. Cross. Has been for 2 months. We found his body in a warehouse in Elizabeth. Apparently he couldn't live with what he'd done." "You're lying." "Am I? Your father stole $92 million from people who don't forgive debts. Did you really think they'd let him live?" Emma made a small sound of distress beside him, but Aiden kept his focus on Chen. "If he's dead, then why do you need the gold back? Why not just take it and disappear?" Because there's more than one cache, Mr. Cross. Your father was paranoid. He split the gold into multiple hiding places, left clues that only family members could follow. We found the first cache empty, thanks to you. But there are others, and you need us to find them. We need you alive long enough to lead us to them. After that, she shrugged. Aidan felt the weight of Vincent's journal in his jacket pocket. If there were other caches, there might be clues in those pages. But more importantly, if Vincent really was dead, then Emma was the only family he had left, and he'd be damned if he'd let these people hurt her. The gold, Chen said, extending her hand. Now. Aidan looked at the bar in his hand, then at Emma, then at the circle of armed criminals surrounding them. You want the gold? He said. Come and get it. He hurled the bar as hard as he could toward the nearest parked car. It struck the windshield with a sharp crack, and in the moment of distraction that followed, he grabbed Emma's hand and ran toward the only opening he could see, a storm drain grating that had been partially dislodged by snowplows. Gunshots erupted behind them as they dove through the opening into the storm drain system beneath the street. Cold water and slush soaked through their clothes instantly, but they were alive and moving. Where are we going? Emma gasped as they splashed through the tunnel. I have no idea, Aidan admitted, but anywhere is better than there. Above them, he could hear vehicles moving, voices shouting orders. The Torino family wasn't giving up. They were regrouping, probably calling in more resources. But they were also dealing with something they hadn't expected. Vincent Romano's children, working together for the first time. As they made their way through the dark tunnels beneath Newark, following the flow of water toward whatever exit they could find, Aidan realized that everything had changed again. His father might be dead, but Vincent Romano's final gambit was still in play. Hidden caches of gold, clues that only family could follow, and two young people who were just beginning to understand the scope of what they'd inherited. The question was whether they could stay alive long enough to figure out what Vincent had really planned, and whether they could trust each other enough to see it through. The storm drain system beneath Newark was a maze of concrete tunnels, some wide enough to walk upright, others barely large enough to crawl through. Aidan and Emma had been moving through them for 20 minutes, following the flow of water and hoping it would lead them away from the surface teams hunting them. The water was ankle-deep and freezing, soaking through their shoes and numbing their feet. Emma had stopped shivering about 10 minutes ago, which Aidan knew was a bad sign. Hypothermia was setting in for both of them. There, Emma said, pointing ahead with a trembling hand. Light. She was right. About 50 feet ahead, pale light filtered down through a grating, probably from a street lamp above. More importantly, there was a maintenance ladder leading up to what looked like a utility access point. They climbed up carefully, Aidan testing each rung before putting his full weight on it. The metal was slick with condensation and ice, but it held. At the top, he peered through the grating into what appeared to be a small park or playground. Coast looks clear, he whispered down to Emma. The grating was heavy, but not locked. He pushed it aside and pulled himself up onto frozen ground covered with snow. The park was empty, just swings and a slide casting long shadows under the streetlights. Beyond the playground, he could see residential buildings, row houses with narrow front yards and cars parked along the curb. He helped Emma out of the drain, both of them moving stiffly from the cold. Her lips were blue, and her hands shook as she tried to zip her jacket. We need to get warm, she said through chattering teeth. And we need to figure out our next move. First things first. Where are we? Emma looked around, getting her bearings. Ironbound district, I think. Portuguese and Brazilian neighborhood. My roommate at Rutgers is from here. I visited a few times. That was good. An ethnic neighborhood where two young people might blend in, where residents might be naturally suspicious of outsiders asking questions. Do you know anywhere we could go? Somewhere safe? Emma considered. There's a community center about 6 blocks from here, St. Anthony's. They have a soup kitchen and overnight shelter program, but... But if the Torinos have been watching Dad for months, they might know about any place he's ever donated money to or volunteered. He was always giving to Catholic charities. Aidan pulled out Vincent's journal, the pages now slightly damp from their underground journey. Maybe there's something in here. Other locations. People he trusted. They huddled together on a bench under a streetlight, sharing body heat, while Aidan flipped through the journal. Emma read over his shoulder, and he could feel her tension as she learned more about the father who had shaped both their lives from a distance. "Here," she said, pointing to an entry from 8 months ago. "Luis Mendoza, Sacred Heart Auto Repair, says Dad trusted him to work on his car, never asked questions about fake IDs or modifications. Think he's still in business? Only one way to find out." Sacred Heart Auto Repair was a small garage tucked between a grocery store and a laundromat, its neon sign flickering weakly in the falling snow. The main bay doors were closed, but light showed through the office windows, and they could hear the sound of a television inside. Aidan knocked on the office door, hoping they didn't look too much like trouble. After a moment, a man in his 50s opened the door, wiping greasy hands on a shop rag. He was stocky and weathered, with salt and pepper hair and intelligent dark eyes. "We're closed," he said, but not unkindly. "Mr. Mendoza?" Aidan asked. "Luis Mendoza." The man's expression became more guarded. "Depends who's asking. My name is Aidan Cross. This is Emma Romano. We're Vincent Romano's children." Luis Mendoza stared at them for a long moment, then quickly ushered them inside and locked the door behind them. The office was small and cluttered, with automotive magazines stacked on every surface and a coffee pot that looked like it had been brewing the same batch for hours. "Vincent's kids?" Luis said, studying their faces. "Jesus, you look just like him. Both of you." "You know about both of us?" Emma asked. "Vincent talked about his boy sometimes when he was here late at night, working on that beat-up Honda of his. Said he had a son he couldn't see, daughter he was trying to protect. Broke his heart, keeping you apart." Aidan felt something twist in his chest. Is Vincent really dead?" Luis was quiet for a moment. "You're in trouble, aren't you? That's why you're here." "The Torino family," Emma said. "They've been hunting us all night. They say Dad is dead, but we're not sure if we believe them. Smart not to believe them. They're liars and killers, every one of them." Luis moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the street outside. "But Vincent, I haven't seen him in 2 months. Last time he was here, he was scared, really scared." "What did he say?" "Said he'd made his choice, that he was going to disappear for a while. Asked me to watch out for 2 kids who might show up looking for help. His kids. Left me something to give you, if you ever came." Luis walked to an old filing cabinet and pulled out a thick manila envelope sealed with tape. "He made me promise to only give this to both of you together. Said it wouldn't work if you were apart." Aidan took the envelope with trembling hands. It was heavy, and he could feel the shape of keys inside along with papers. "What's in it?" Emma asked. "Don't know. Vincent said it was insurance. Something to keep you safe if the worst happened." Aidan opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter in Vincent's handwriting, 2 sets of keys, and what looked like a property deed. The letter was addressed to both of them, Aidan and Emma. "If you're reading this, then either I'm dead or close to it, and the Torinos have found you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for so many things, but mostly I'm sorry that my choices put you both in danger. Aidan, I know you must hate me for abandoning you. I pray that someday you'll understand that giving you up was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most necessary. Your mother died because of my debts, my stupid decisions. I couldn't let the same thing happen to you. Emma, I know you figured out that I'm not dead. You're too smart for your own good, just like your mother was. I've been hiding not because I wanted to leave you, but because staying close would have gotten you killed. The gold you've probably heard about by now is real. $92 million, stolen from the Torino family's arms dealing operation. But it's not just money, it's evidence. Each bar is marked with serial numbers that correspond to weapons transactions, human trafficking operations, murders. The FBI has been trying to build a case against the family for years, but they could never get close enough to their financial records. I gave them that access. I've been feeding information to Agent Rebecca Martinez, real FBI, not the fake agents the Torinos will send after you, for 8 months. The gold theft was the final piece of evidence she needed to bring down the entire organization. But the Torinos know about Agent Martinez now. They've probably killed her or bought her off. You can't trust anyone in law enforcement. Too many people owe favors, take bribes, or are just plain scared. That's why I hid the gold in multiple locations, with clues that only you two could follow together. Not because I wanted you to keep it, blood money belongs in hell, but because you're the only ones who can finish what I started. The keys in this envelope open 2 safety deposit boxes at First National Bank on Broad Street, Box 247 and Box 248. Inside, you'll find maps to the other gold caches and instructions for contacting Agent Martinez's partner, Agent David Kim. He's one of the good ones, but he's been forced underground since Martinez disappeared. The property deed is for a house in Pine Barrens, under your mother's maiden name, Sarah Cross. It's isolated, well-supplied, and safe. If everything goes to hell, go there and wait for Agent Kim to contact you. I know I'm asking too much of you both. I know you're just kids who should be worried about college and jobs and normal things, not organized crime and federal investigations. But you're the only ones left who can make sure the people who killed your mothers don't hurt anyone else. Be careful, trust each other, and remember that everything I did because I love you both more than my own life. Your father, Vincent Romano P.S. Aiden, the laptop you got for your 15th birthday. Emma picked it out. I showed her your picture, told her about her big brother who was good with computers. She insisted on the best one in the store. P.S. Emma, the college fund that paid your tuition? Your brother's been contributing to it for 2 years, sending money from odd jobs, even when he was living on the streets. He didn't know it was for you, but he knew it was for family. Aiden looked up from the letter to find Emma staring at him with tears in her eyes. You've been helping pay for my college. I didn't know it was for you specifically. Sister Margaret told me about a fund for kids aging out of the system. Asked if I wanted to contribute when I had extra money from jobs. He paused. You picked out my laptop. Dad showed me pictures sometimes. Said you were smart, that you deserved the best tools to succeed. I made him buy you the one with the best processor and graphics card. For a moment, the danger, the cold, the fear, all of it faded away. They were just a brother and sister getting to know each other for the first time. Luis cleared his throat gently. Not to interrupt, but you should know. There's been cars driving around the neighborhood for the last hour. Black sedans, tinted windows. They're looking for someone. The spell was broken. They were back to being hunted fugitives with a choice to make. The bank, Emma said. We need to get to those safety deposit boxes. Banks are closed until morning, Aiden pointed out. Then we wait until morning. Find somewhere safe to hole up for the night. Dream, what about the house in Pine Barrens? Aiden asked. Too far. If we try to drive there tonight, we'll be exposed on the highways. Better to stay in the city, blend in with the crowd. Luis had been listening to their conversation. I might have a suggestion. There's a room above the garage. Used to be an apartment before I converted the space to storage. It's not fancy, but it's warm and dry, and nobody knows about it except me. Mr. Mendoza, we can't ask you to... Vincent saved my son's life once, Luis interrupted. Miguel was mixed up with some bad people, owed money he couldn't pay. Vincent made some calls, pulled some strings, got the debt erased. Told me to call it even for some work he'd done on his car, but we both knew better. He led them through the garage, past cars in various states of repair, to a narrow staircase hidden behind a stack of tires. The room above was small but comfortable, with a twin bed, a mini fridge, and a space heater that filled the room with blessed warmth. Get some rest, Luis said. I'll keep watch downstairs, let you know if anyone comes around asking questions. When he left, Aiden and Emma sat on the bed. sharing the space heater's warmth and trying to process everything they'd learned. "Do you think he's really dead?" Emma asked quietly. "I don't know. The letter sounds like a goodbye, but Vincent was paranoid. Maybe he wanted everyone to think he was dead while he figured out his next move. Or maybe he is dead, and we're all that's left to finish this." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind outside and the occasional sound of Luis moving around in the garage below. "Aiden," Emma said finally, "I'm scared." "Me too. But I'm glad I'm not alone. I've been alone for so long, thinking Dad was dead, not knowing I had family." "Same here. I used to imagine what it would be like to have a brother or sister, someone who understood what it was like to be abandoned." "We weren't abandoned," Emma said firmly. "We were protected. There's a difference." "Is there? Because I spent 18 years thinking I wasn't wanted. And I spent 17 years thinking I was the only person my father cared about, which made me selfish and entitled." She looked at him. "But we're together now. And tomorrow we're going to that bank, and we're going to finish what Vincent started. Even if it gets us killed. Especially if it gets us killed. Because if we don't stop the Torinos, they'll just keep hurting people. Other families, other kids who'll grow up without parents because of their crimes." Aiden studied his sister's face in the dim light from the space heater. She was right. They both had their father's stubborn streak, the inability to back down when they believed in something. "All right," he said. "We do this together." Together. They settled in to wait for morning, taking turns keeping watch while the other slept. But even when he was supposed to be resting, Aiden found himself staring at the ceiling and thinking about the choice they'd made. In a few hours, they would walk into First National Bank and retrieve whatever Vincent had left for them. Maps to hidden gold, instructions for contacting a federal agent who might be dead or compromised, and the evidence needed to destroy one of the most dangerous crime families on the East Coast. They were 18 and 17 years old, with no weapons, no resources, and no experience with this kind of danger. By any reasonable measure, they were walking into a suicide mission. But they were Vincent Romano's children, and they had each other. Outside, snow continued to fall on Newark, covering the city in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and peaceful. But Aiden knew that when morning came, the real battle would begin. The Torino family had 92 million reasons to kill them, and all the resources of a major criminal organization. All Aiden and Emma had was each other, their father's final plan, and the desperate hope that love and determination could triumph over greed and violence. It would have to be enough. Because at 9 a.m., when First National Bank opened its doors, Vincent Romano's children were going to finish what their father started, or die trying. The gold was just the beginning. The real treasure was family, and the real war was just about to start. Dawn broke grey and cold over Newark, the snow from the night before creating a deceptive blanket of purity over the city's rough edges. Aiden woke to the sound of Luis moving around in the garage below, the familiar sounds of a workday beginning. Coffee brewing, radio playing softly, the metallic clink of tools being organized. Emma was already awake, sitting by the small window and watching the street with the focused intensity of someone who'd learned to be afraid. "Anything?" Aiden asked, joining her at the window. "A few cars, but nothing that screams criminal organization. Might just be people going to work. Or might be the Torinos being more careful today." They'd agreed the night before to leave for the bank early, when the streets were busy with morning commuters, but before the Torino crews had time to establish surveillance. First National Bank opened at 9 a.m. sharp, and they planned to be the first customers through the door. Luis knocked softly and entered with coffee and buttered toast on a tray. "Sleep okay?" "As well as could be expected," Emma said. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Mendoza. We know we're putting you at risk." "Vincent put himself at risk to help my family. This is just paying forward." He set the tray down and grew serious. "But you should know, I drove around the neighborhood this morning, checking things out. There's definitely people watching. Professional surveillance, trying to look casual, but not quite pulling it off." How many? Aiden asked. At least 4 cars that I spotted, probably more. They're spread out, covering the main routes to downtown. Emma and Aiden exchanged glances. They'd expected this, but knowing and facing it were different things. There's a service entrance to the bank, Luis continued. Loading dock for armored cars, staff entrance. I used to do maintenance work there before I opened my own shop. If you can get inside the building, you might be able to access the safety deposit boxes without going through the main lobby. How do we get inside? My cousin Maria works building maintenance for the whole block. She's got keys, knows the security schedules. More importantly, she hates the Torino family. They killed her brother 5 years ago over a gambling debt. Would she help us? For Vincent Romano's kids? Absolutely. An hour later, they were crouched in the back of Luis's tow truck, hidden under tarps and spare tires, as he drove through downtown Newark toward the financial district. Through gaps in the covering, Aiden could see the black sedans that had become sickeningly familiar, positioned at intersections and following at discrete distances. The tow truck pulled into an alley behind the First National Bank building, and Luis knocked twice on the back door. A woman in her 40s wearing a maintenance uniform answered, Maria Mendoza, with her cousin's intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd seen too much of the world's ugliness. "Vincent's kids?" she asked without preamble. "That's us," Emma said. "Good. That bastard Tony Torino has it coming. Your father was trying to take him down." "Still trying, I think," Aiden said. "We're here to finish it." Maria led them through service corridors that wound through the building's infrastructure, past boiler rooms and electrical panels, up narrow staircases meant for maintenance workers, through doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The building was a maze, but she navigated it with the confidence of someone who'd spent years keeping it running. "Safety deposit boxes are on the 3rd floor," she explained as they climbed. "Bank won't be open for another 20 minutes, but the vault systems are already active. You'll need to get in and out fast. Security makes rounds every half hour." They emerged into a carpeted hallway lined with frosted glass doors bearing the names of financial advisors and loan officers. At the far end was a heavy steel door marked Private Banking Services. "That's your destination," Maria said, producing a key ring that would have impressed a prison warden. "I can get you inside, but I can't stay. Too risky for both of us if I'm caught helping." "We understand," Emma said. "Thank you." The safety deposit box area was a windowless room lined with numbered metal compartments, each requiring 2 keys to open, one held by the bank, one by the customer. But Vincent had been thorough in his planning. Along with his personal keys, he'd left them copies of the bank's master keys, acquired through methods Aiden preferred not to think about too carefully. Box 247 contained maps, hand-drawn detailed maps of Newark and the surrounding area, with locations marked in Vincent's precise handwriting. Cache 2, St. Mary's Cemetery, Romano family plot. Cache 3, Ironbound Community Center, boiler room. Cache 4, Pine Barrens House, root cellar. 4 locations total, including the one Aiden had already discovered. Enough hidden gold to finance a small war or to provide evidence of dozens of major crimes. Box 248 contained something more valuable than gold, a cell phone with a single number programmed into it, labeled Agent Kim, and a sealed letter marked for FBI only. Emma opened the letter while Aiden studied the maps. "It's a complete breakdown of the Torino family's operations," she said, reading quickly. "Names, dates, financial transactions, locations of weapons shipments, everything the FBI would need to make arrests and seizures. And the phone? Emergency contact for Agent David Kim. Vincent says Kim has been working undercover for 2 years, building cases against organized crime families up and down the East Coast." Aiden looked at his watch. 8:47 a.m. In 13 minutes, the bank would open and customers would start arriving. If the Torinos had people inside the bank, and they probably did, their window of opportunity was closing fast. "We need to make a choice," he said. "Try to recover all the gold caches, or contact Agent Kim now and let the FBI handle it. What do you think Dad would want us to do? Before Aiden could answer, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing the room in an eerie red glow, but the message was clear. Someone had cut the building's power, someone who knew they were here. Shit, Emma breathed. The steel door to the safety deposit box room slammed shut with a definitive clang, followed by the sound of electronic locks engaging. They were trapped. Aiden's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. You have something that belongs to us. Main lobby, 5 minutes, or we start killing bank employees. They found us, Emma said. How? Doesn't matter. We're trapped in here and they're threatening innocent people. Aiden looked around the windowless room, searching for options. No other exits, no vents large enough to crawl through, walls too thick to break. But there was something else. A fire alarm pull station next to the door. The fire department, he said. If we trigger the alarm, they'll have to respond. Police, fire trucks, EMTs. Too many witnesses for the Torinos to just start shooting people. But we'll still be trapped in here when they arrive. Maybe. Or maybe the fire department has override codes for the electronic locks. Emma considered this. It's worth a try. Aiden pulled the fire alarm, and immediately the building filled with the deafening wail of sirens. Emergency lights flashed, and somewhere in the distance they could hear people shouting and evacuating. 5 minutes later, the steel door's locks disengaged with a mechanical click. But instead of firefighters, Agent Lisa Chen stepped through the doorway, flanked by 2 armed men. Clever, she said, but ultimately pointless. The fire department will be here any minute, Emma said. The fire department received a call 30 seconds ago informing them it was a false alarm, system malfunction. They're turning around. Chen smiled. We own more people than you realize, Miss Romano. What do you want? The same thing we've always wanted. The gold, and the information Vincent stole along with it. She gestured, and one of her men produced a tablet computer. We've been monitoring federal communications for months. We know about Agent Kim, about the evidence your father compiled, about the FBI's investigation. The tablet screen showed surveillance photos. Agent Kim entering a federal building, Agent Kim meeting with other investigators, Agent Kim's family at their home in suburban Maryland. Agent Kim had an unfortunate accident this morning, Chen continued. House fire, terrible tragedy. His wife and 2 children barely escaped with their lives. Emma made a small, choked sound. But they did escape, Chen said, and they'll stay safe, as long as you cooperate. All we want is the gold and any evidence your father gathered. In exchange, you get to live. Agent Kim's family stays safe, and everyone goes on with their lives. And if we refuse? Then Agent Kim's family dies, you die, and we tear this city apart until we find what we're looking for anyway. Same outcome for us, much worse outcome for everyone else. Aiden felt the weight of Vincent's letter in his pocket, the cell phone that was their only connection to legitimate law enforcement. Chen was right about one thing, they held all the cards. But Vincent Romano had been in similar situations before, and he'd always found a third option. I'll make you a deal, Aiden said. You're not in a position to make deals. I'll take you to all 4 gold caches. Personal escort, no tricks, no traps, but Emma stays here unharmed until the transfer is complete. Aiden, no, Emma said urgently. It's the only way to keep everyone safe. Chen considered this. All 4 caches, including the one you already emptied? I'll show you where the gold is hidden. I took 1 bar, but the rest should still be there. It was a lie, but Chen didn't know that. Aiden was betting that Vincent's paranoia had extended to moving the gold after someone, maybe Aiden himself, had discovered the first cache. Deal, Chen said. But if you're lying, if there's any deception at all, your sister dies first, then Agent Kim's family, then you. They left Emma under guard in the safety deposit box room and took Aiden down to the main lobby, which had been cleared of bank employees and customers. 3 black SUVs were waiting outside, engines running. The first cache was Vincent's original hiding place on Seymour Avenue. Aiden led Chen's team to the basement, moved the bed away from the wall, and opened the hidden compartment. Empty, just as he'd expected. "Where's the gold?" Chen demanded. "I don't know. It was here yesterday, I swear." Chen nodded to one of her men, who immediately called someone. "Tell the others to kill the girl." "Wait," Aiden said desperately. "Let me check the other locations. Maybe Vincent moved it after I found this place. He was paranoid about security." Chen held up her hand, halting the execution order. "Cash 2. Now." St. Mary's Cemetery was a sprawling collection of weathered headstones and ancient mausoleums, dusted with snow that made everything look like a scene from a Gothic novel. The Romano family plot was in the older section, dominated by an elaborate marble monument that had been erected decades ago. Vincent's map indicated the gold was hidden in a maintenance shed behind the monument, but when they broke open the lock, they found only gardening tools and bags of fertilizer. "Cash 3, Chen said, her patience clearly wearing thin. The Ironbound Community Center was a busy place, even in mid-morning, with senior citizens attending exercise classes and mothers dropping off children at daycare. Chen's team had to wait for a lull in activity before breaking into the boiler room. Again, nothing. "You're running out of locations, Mr. Cross," Chen said as they climbed back into the SUVs, "and I'm running out of patience." "There's still the house in Pine Barrens," Aiden said. "That's the most secure location. Maybe Vincent moved everything there." But even as he said it, he was starting to understand what his father had really done. Vincent Romano hadn't just stolen $92 million in gold, he'd made it disappear completely. Hidden it so well that even his own children couldn't find it without solving puzzles that went beyond simple treasure maps. The house in Pine Barrens was exactly as Vincent's letter had described, isolated, well-supplied, and surrounded by miles of wilderness. It looked like an ordinary vacation cabin, the kind of place a middle-class family might rent for a weekend getaway. But the root cellar beneath the kitchen was anything but ordinary. It was a bunker, really. Concrete walls, steel reinforcements, and enough supplies to sustain several people for months. And in the center of the room, bolted to the floor, was a safe that looked like it belonged in a bank vault. "Open it," Chen commanded. Aiden tried the combination from Vincent's journal, the same numbers that had opened the first cache. The safe clicked open to reveal stacks of documents, hard drives, and photographic evidence, but no gold. Chen snatched up one of the hard drives, examining it closely. "Financial records?" "Everything Vincent compiled about your operations," Aiden said. 2 years' worth of evidence." "Where's the gold?" "I don't know." Chen grabbed him by the throat, pressing him against the concrete wall. "Don't lie to me. Vincent Romano stole $92 million in gold bars. Where are they?" "Maybe," Aiden gasped, struggling to speak around her grip. "Maybe he never intended to keep them." Chen released him, stepping back with a confused expression. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Vincent was a forensic accountant, not a thief. He didn't steal the gold to get rich. He stole it to destroy your organization. What if he turned it over to the FBI months ago?" The color drained from Chen's face as the implications sank in. If Vincent had already delivered the evidence to federal authorities, if the gold was already in FBI custody, then everything the Torino family had done to find it, including tonight's violence, had been pointless. Worse, it had exposed them to the very law enforcement attention they'd been trying to avoid. Chen's phone rang. She answered it with a sharp "What?" that echoed in the concrete bunker. "Are you sure?" she said after listening for several seconds. "All of them?" She hung up and looked at Aiden with something approaching respect. 67 members of the Torino organization were arrested this morning, she said. Simultaneous raids in Newark, New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. FBI, DEA, ATF, and local police. They had warrants for everything: weapons trafficking, money laundering, racketeering, murder. The gold was turned over to federal authorities 3 months ago, along with complete financial records and recorded conversations. Your father wore a wire for the last 6 months of his life. Aidan felt something that might have been pride, mixed with overwhelming relief. Vincent Romano had outplayed everyone, the Torino family, corrupt federal agents, even his own children. The master manipulator's final manipulation had been perfect. So what now? Aidan asked. Chen was quiet for a long moment, her expression cycling through anger, frustration, and finally, resignation. Now I'm a federal agent whose cover has been blown, whose organization has been destroyed, and whose only remaining options are federal prison or witness protection. She holstered her weapon. Congratulations, Mr. Cross. Your father won. What about Emma? Your sister is fine. My people will release her as soon as I confirm that our operation is over. And you'll let us go? I'll disappear, just like your father did. The difference is, I don't have a cause worth dying for. She turned to leave, then paused at the bunker's entrance. For what it's worth, Vincent Romano was a good man caught in impossible circumstances. He did what he had to do to protect the people he loved. I know, Aidan said quietly. When Chen and her team were gone, Aidan was alone in the bunker with Vincent's evidence and the weight of everything that had happened. His phone, Vincent's phone, buzzed with an incoming call. Agent Kim, he answered. Mr. Cross, this is David Kim, FBI. I understand you've had a very long night. Is it over? The arrests are ongoing, but yes, the immediate danger to you and your sister is over. The Torino organization is finished. And Vincent, is he alive in federal custody and under witness protection? He'll remain there until the trials are complete, but then, well, let's just say he's very much looking forward to meeting his children officially. Aidan felt tears he hadn't realized were building spill down his cheeks. Mr. Cross, are you there? I'm here. There's a car coming to pick you up. We'll reunite you with your sister, and then we'll talk about your future. All of your futures. 6 months later, the coffee shop in Burlington, Vermont was nothing like the diners and fast food places Aidan had grown up in. It was warm and welcoming, with mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and the kind of comfortable atmosphere that made people want to stay and read for hours. Emma looked up from her textbook as he approached her table by the window. How'd the interview go? Good, I think. They want someone to help design security systems for small businesses. Turns out growing up paranoid about surveillance is actually a marketable skill. She laughed. Who would have thought? They'd both started over in Burlington. Emma transferring to the University of Vermont to finish her degree, Aidan enrolling in community college while working part-time. New names, new backgrounds, new lives built on the foundation of Vincent's sacrifice and the FBI's gratitude. Vincent himself was still in witness protection, preparing for the trials that would put the remaining Torino associates behind bars for life. They saw him once a month, supervised visits that were gradually becoming less formal and more familial. Any word from Dad? Aidan asked, settling into the chair across from Emma. He called this morning. Says the prosecutors are confident about the convictions. A few more months of testimony, and he should be free to start over too. Think he'll come here? I hope so. It would be nice to be a real family for once. Outside, snow was beginning to fall again. Not the threatening blizzard of that night in Newark, but the gentle, peaceful snow of a Vermont winter. Students from the university walked by, bundled in warm coats, laughing and talking about normal things like classes and relationships and weekend plans. Do you ever regret it? Emma asked. Giving up the gold, I mean. $92 million. We could have been set for life. Aidan considered the question seriously. The money would have solved a lot of problems, opened doors that remained closed to kids from their background, but it also would have come with a price they'd both decided they couldn't pay. No, he said finally. Blood money belongs in hell, remember? Dad was right about that. But we could have kept just a little bit, Emma said with a grin. Enough for a decent apartment, maybe a car that doesn't break down every other week. We're doing okay, better than okay actually. She nodded, looking around the coffee shop at the life they'd built. Yeah, we are. It wasn't the life either of them had planned 6 months ago. Emma had expected to graduate from Rutgers and start a career in journalism. Aidan had expected to keep drifting from job to job, never quite finding his place in the world. Instead, they'd found each other. And in finding each other, they'd discovered something more valuable than gold. The knowledge that family wasn't just about blood or shared history, but about the choice to stand together when everything else fell apart. The coffee shop door opened with a chime, bringing cold air and the sound of students complaining about their upcoming finals. Normal problems, normal lives, normal concerns. "Emma," Aidan said suddenly. "Yeah? I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we chose this." "Me too, big brother. Me too." Outside, the snow continued to fall on their quiet college town, covering everything in clean white silence. And for the first time in either of their lives, Aidan and Emma Romano Cross felt completely, utterly safe. The gold was gone, the criminals were in jail, and their father would soon be free to join them in building the family they'd all dreamed of, but never quite believed possible. Some treasures, they'd learned, were worth more than money. Some bonds were stronger than gold, and some stories, even stories that began in abandoned houses on cold winter nights, had happy endings after all.